Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews presented by Quantum Podcast. I will be your host, as always, Chris, and this is a show about all things movies and TV. Well, we continue our Marvel marathon with Captain Marvel, starring Brie Larson as, of course, Captain Marvel. Here we are about a couple projects away from ending Phase 3 and then going into Phase 4, which is all over the place with the multiverse part of the MCU, but we're here. We're going to focus on Captain Marvel. We'll return with Avengers Endgame, and we'll catch up with Carol Danvers when she appears in that film. But before we get into Captain Marvel today, we have a big announcement on the show, which I'll talk about here in just a few seconds during our news and reaction segment today. Before we get into that, though, a couple reminders at the top of the episode. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com. So that's the Cinematic Reviews. You can also listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast listening service. We're around the globe now, so there's plenty of options for you to watch and listen to the show. Also, follow, subscribe on social media, on Facebook, X, Instagram, and now TikTok. You can watch the show on TikTok as well. So go ahead and check out all that content, all the graphics from every episode, the shorts, all the news items that I release. Tons of stuff gets released every day on the social media. So go ahead and follow and support the show. I appreciate everybody that has so far. It's been a fun time, and we have a lot of content coming out here shortly. Which, speaking of which, we have a big announcement right now. So for today's news and reactions segment, I have one big piece of news coming from the podcast, and that is I am launching the Cinematic Reviews app. This will be coming next Sunday. Let me check the calendar. It will be April 12th. So on April 12th, the Cinematic Reviews app will launch. This is where you can set up a profile. You can review the movies like I do with the popcorn rating that we do on the show. I wanted to make it an inclusive app for all the fans out there of the podcast. So you can review, use the same logic and reasoning and all of that as I do when I review these movies and TV shows. There's also going to be tons of other features like trivia games to test out your movie and TV show knowledge. There's other little features like seeing how somebody else reviewed a movie that you really liked or you didn't like. So you can go on there and click on that person's profile page and see the different reviews they wrote, their favorite movies, their favorite actors, all sorts of different features on this app. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and it is finally here. So that the Cinematic Reviews app will launch on April 12th. So just about a week away. So tons of stuff to still do on the app to get it ready for launch day, but it will be ready on April 12th. So check that out on your app store on whatever device you so please. So with that, let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into our feature film of the day, Captain Marvel. This episode is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Still drinking energy that quits before you do? Stop crashing, stop shaking, and start performing. Meet Dubby Energy, clean energy made for gamers, creators, and anyone who refuses to slow down. With zero sugar, no jitters, and no crash, Dubby keeps you locked in whether you're grinding ranked, streaming for hours, or pushing through those late nights. There's no crash, no fade, just gas. Drink different, perform better. Grab Dubby Energy and use code Cinematic10 to get 10% off your order today.
War is a universal language. I know a renegade soldier when I see one. Never occurred to me that one might come from above. Space invasion, big car chase. Truth be told, I was ready to hang it up till I met you today. So you're not from around here?
It's hard to explain. I keep having these memories. I see flashes. I think I had a life here. But I can't tell if it's real.
We have no idea what threats are out there. We can't do this alone. We need you.
I'm not what you think I am.
Captain Marvel was released on March 8th, 2019. I remember seeing this movie opening weekend, like I did most of these MCU movies. Brie Larson was an actress that I wasn't really a huge fan of. I mean, I remember her. We talked about her most recently on the Scott Pilgrim review episode. She was great in there as my Scott Pilgrim's ex. In here, she is Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers in the MCU. Just not a really big Brie Larson fan. So my review of Captain Marvel today is going to be solely based on my thoughts and feelings on Brie Larson as an actress. I'm sure she's a wonderful person in real life, but as far as the acting, just not an actress that I'm drawn to, that I think is that talented, and nothing personal against her. It's just my feelings when it comes to her acting. So a lot of that review that I do today is going to be based on my thoughts and feelings on Brie Larson as an actor. So, but looking at the box office back in 2019, the movie had a budget of about 160 million, so not too crazy. And then it did gross a whopping 1.1 billion dollars. Now, to remind you, this was around the time that Stan Lee passed away. This was actually his last cameo that he did in the MCU. So not to take anything away from the movie. I mean, the movie was serviceable, and we'll get into that, of course. But just want to remind everybody that when this movie came out, this was around the time that Stan Lee passed away. So a lot of people wanted to go see his last, cameo in a movie, specifically the MCU cameos that he's been doing. So that, of course, was probably a huge push to get that $1 billion mark. Also, coming off of Infinity War and Ant-Man and the Wasp, everyone's getting prepared for Avengers Endgame. So that's another thing, too, where they announced that Brie Larson at the end of this movie is going to be an Endgame. So I'm sure a lot of people raced to the theaters to see this one so that they could be caught up on the background that is Captain Marvel in the MCU. So a lot of different factors go into it. You could probably get at what I'm saying here. This is not a great movie. It's definitely on the lower scale of the MCU as far as ranking it, and we'll get into that, of course, later on. But there was other world factors that caused this movie to cross $1 billion, in my opinion. It wasn't the movie itself. It was, like I said, the fact that Stan Lee passed away and that Captain Marvel was being introduced into the MCU finally, and people wanted to just get caught up on her origin story before Endgame hit so that they weren't confused. So different aspects going on that ultimately nudged it up to that $1 billion mark. Let's look at the cast here. Not a huge cast, but there are some notable names, even some returning people. I totally forgot that Ronan the Accuser was in here. You remember him back from the first Guardians of the Galaxy film as the main antagonist in that one. Well, he returns in here in a brief side character storyline. But like I said, Brie Larson plays Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, aka Verse. For the first part of the movie, she's referred to as Verse because she lost her memory. To give you kind of a brief synopsis of the film before we get into the cast, takes place in 1995. She originated from Earth, or Terran as they call it in the MCU, when the Kree came down to attack Dr. Lawson. They wanted the device in the spacecraft that they were testing. Brie Larson ends up getting infected by that, and the Kree, led by Jude Law's character, Jan Rog. He brought her to the Kree homeworld in front of the Supreme Intelligence, and they brainwashed her into thinking that she was Kree, and her mission is to hunt down and capture Skrulls, which is the other half of this big Skrull Kree war going on in the MCU. It's a big storyline in the comic books as well. It's a part of the Marvel universe I wasn't really exposed to growing up. It wasn't until this movie and Secret Invasion came out that I really started digging into, the whole Kree versus Skrull storyline in the Marvel universe. In the MCU's version, the Skrulls are these. What's the best term? They're essentially immigrants. Coming down to Earth, hiding out, shape shifting into humans to hide amongst the human beings so that the Kree can't find them. And that's kind of their superpower is shape shifting and blending into plain sight. The Kree, on the other hand, want to rule all these different worlds. They believe that they are the supreme intelligence, so to speak, and Jude Law has been tasked with his team, along with Brie Larson's Captain Marvel, to hunt down these Skrulls. Turns out, when Captain Marvel gets captured by the Skrulls, Ben Mendelsohn's character Talos, specifically, who is kind of the leader of this group of Skrulls, they start messing around with her mind, and they realize that she isn't who she thinks she is. She is from Earth, and she's got some memory loss that she is going to ultimately discover herself, and then she gets reunited with her family and Maria Rambeau and Monica Rambeau, also known as Lieutenant Trouble, who we'll see coming up here shortly again, grown up as in WandaVision. But Maria Rambeau is Carol's best friend, fellow fighter pilot, and they help her kind of regain her memory after the loss. Nick Fury comes back in the MCU, played again, of course, by Samuel L. Jackson. We also get Agent Coulson back. With this being set in 1995, they, of course, went through some de-aging effects post-production. We'll talk about that a little bit here shortly. But Clark Gregg, of course, returns as Agent Coulson. Ben Mendelsohn, like I said, plays Talos. He is the leader of this group of Skrulls that have been hiding out on Earth, and they are trying to find a new homeworld away from the Kree. So Ben Mendelsohn's great. I love him as Talos. We'll see him again in Secret Invasion, which I'm actually kind of excited to watch again. I haven't seen it since it aired on Disney Plus, so we'll rewatch it again for the marathon that we're doing in preparation for Avengers Doomsday. I'm actually looking forward to it. Maybe my thoughts on it have changed a lot. I'm very excited to dig deeper into this whole Skrull Kree war going on in the MCU. And then, like I said, Ronan the Accuser returns. When we first saw him in Guardians of the Galaxy, he has now teamed up with Young Rog, Jude Law's character, to hunt down the Skrulls. But then he eventually meets Captain Marvel and sees what she can do. So he makes this promise to his crew that they will return for the weapon, not the Tesseract, but Captain Marvel herself. So it's good to see him come back. And then, like I said, Dr. Larson is the other. She kind of created that superpowered jet that Carol Danvers is flying throughout the film. And then she ends up getting affected by it with the Tesseract power. She's also the Supreme Intelligence, is the person that that Carol Danvers sees when she's on the Kree homeworld. And it's supposed to, from what this movie says, the Supreme Intelligence appears as the person you're most closest to. So obviously this was kind of a hint at something isn't all that it seems, where she has this Dr. Lawson in her memory. Turns out Dr. Lawson is a Kree, but she is trying to help the Skrulls and all that. So it's kind of a twist there at the end. But so it's kind of a shortened cast. It mainly focuses on Captain Marvel and her relationship with Nick Fury as they first meet, and then eventually this ties into that post-credit scene at the end of Infinity War, where Nick Fury gets snapped by Thanos, but we see him activate the Captain Marvel communicator before he is completely snapped. And then at the end of this movie is where we see that Captain America, Black Widow, War Machine, they have the communicator that they found where uh, Nick Fury was snapped at, and they are trying to communicate with Captain Marvel. She ends up popping up there the very last second of the post-credit scene, foreshadowing that she will return in Endgame. So really, really cool there. This was directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who I have no idea who they are. So let's just take a brief moment here to look at what projects they've been involved with. Not a whole lot. Looks like it's Captain Marvel, and that is about it. Looks like Anna Boden directed Mississippi Grind with Ryan Reynolds and Ben Mendelsohn, so that makes sense. That was a gambling one. That one's okay. It's not bad. Not Ryan Reynolds' best performance, but it's serviceable. And that looks about it. I think Captain Marvel is probably the biggest thing that she's done. Let's look at Ryan Fleck here for a second. Same thing. Looks like he worked on Mississippi Grind, Masters of the Air, which is a Apple TV Plus show. But yeah, biggest thing they've done is Captain Marvel. So no surprise. I mean, this movie didn't do, other than the, hitting $1 billion. It's very low reviewed. It's, like I said, one of the weakest and worst Marvel projects out there. So I'm not surprised that they didn't, have projects lining up at the door after this one. Couple notes here before we get into today's iconic scenes and favorite quotes and all that. The Skrull transformation effect. I wanted to bring this up because this is something I noticed when I watched the movie this time around. When they shift, it looks painful. That they're kind of like discomforted and things like that. So I wonder if like they're actually, when they shift things, like a lot of movies and shows where people are shape shifting, it looks like they're not going through any pain or discomfort. The Skrulls are clearly going through some discomfort and even some pain when they shapeshift. I thought that was an interesting effect and something I didn't notice until this last rewatch. It's amazing the kind of little things you pick up when you watch these movies over and over and over again. So that's one of the things that really stood out to me. We have the Yon-Rogg Kree twist, like I mentioned already, where the movie starts off with, we have Verse, who is claims to be a Kree. Looks like the Kree are the good guys. They're hunting down these Skrulls who are supposedly killing people because they're shape-shifting. Well, flip it on its head. Actually, the Kree are a bunch of pieces of shit, and the Skrulls are actually the good guys just trying to find a world to survive in. And that was a pretty good twist. It could have been executed a little bit better. But I appreciate it when movies do that, where they lead you in one direction and they go, oh, we're going to pull the rug out from under you. And this is actually what the reality of it is. So, and I really like the Skrulls. Ben Mendelsohn's really good. I hope we get more introductions of the Skrulls as they try to redirect the ship, so to speak, because I think Captain Marvel and Secret Invasion were poor attempts at telling the Kree and Skrull storyline. I think, given it a little bit of time, I think Kevin Feige can try to rework this story into the MCU again and hopefully do some justice to it. The de-aging with Nick Fury and Coulson is very obvious. At the time in 2019, this is something that Disney was experimenting with. They did it with Star Wars. They did it with some other projects, Marvel. But it was clear and obvious that they were de-aging Clark Gregg and Samuel L. Jackson. Was it perfect? No. But it is one of the better de-agings, I think. The best one I think they've done so far was probably, trying to think of one. I mean, General Tarkin and what was it, Rogue One or whatever, that was all right. I think when they had Princess Leia in at the end of Rogue One, I think that one was the best one. It looked exactly like Carrie Fisher. The voice and the mouth movements matched as well as it could. But I think that was I think the Star Wars part of Disney has done the aging correctly. I don't think the Marvel has quite nailed it. They haven't really done it since, but this is the biggest instance I remember was de-aging Sam Jackson and Coulson because it's 1995. But I think obviously it could have been done better, but it's not the worst. They did a serviceable job with the de-aging, and it made sense with the storyline. And then lastly, before we get into the categories today, we got to, of course, talk about the Captain Marvel history between Marvel and DC. You know, for those that don't know, Captain Marvel was a character in both DC and Marvel. Now they have reworked his name into Shazam. But at one point it was Captain Marvel. So the history of the Captain Marvel character, name / trademark, as related to the comics, spans through multiple decades, and at least 3 different publishers have dealt with it. The first comic book character named Captain Marvel was introduced back in 1939. Today, known as DC's comic Shazam, like I said, was the flagship character for that comic book company that released it. Eventually, they were sued in 1941 by DC, who alleged that this Captain Marvel was a copyright infringement of Superman, successfully driving that comic book publishing company's character out of print by the year of 1953. When that said company, their trademark on Captain Marvel fell into limbo after over a decade of basically not using it. That is when looks like Marvel Enterprises attempted to introduce their own Captain Marvel back in 1966. Marvel Comics, in response, introduced their own. No, okay, so MF Enterprises is a different comic book. There's a lot of different comic book companies involved in this story. Okay, so another comic book company introduced their character in 1966. So then Marvel Comics is like, hey, let's introduce our own Captain Marvel because we're Marvel Comics. And then they successfully sued that MF comic book company behind their use of the word Marvel in their publication's title, which Marvel Comics had trademarked, obviously. When DC decided to revive the original version of Captain Marvel themselves in 1972, they learned that they could not use Captain Marvel in the comic book title due to the Marvel's trademark, obviously. So then that's when DC instead marketed their character under the name of Shazam. This was in 1972. Looks like in 1974, there was a cease and desist from Marvel. So that is where Shazam was created. This was their name of their Captain Marvel mentor, and the magic word of the character uses the access. His power was Shazam, of course. So then they just named the character Shazam. In order for Marvel to retain their trademark, they were required to publish Captain Marvel comic books, obviously. Not being a popular money-making character, Marvel fulfilled its requirement by publishing a series of one-off comic books over a series of years. And then in 2012, Carol Danvers, the former Miss Marvel and the lead character of this film, acquired the Captain Marvel mantle at Marvel, while DC decided to rename their character Shazam, of course, at that time. Ironically, a Shazam feature film from New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers, and DC Entertainment was released to theaters a month after Marvel Studios' Captain Marvel, which, yep, it was. There was Shazam came out shortly after. But so that kind of gives you, it's a big mess over the decades. But basically, DC originally had the name Captain Marvel as one of their characters, but with Marvel, they trademarked the word Marvel, so DC couldn't use it. So then they had to revert to Shazam, which is the word that the character speaks in order to access their powers, if you're familiar with the Shazam character. So it's a big old legal mess with cease and desists and all that. So basically, Marvel owns the word Marvel, so anything related to that, nobody can use. So that's kind of the long and complicated history of this character, but just felt like I at least needed to mention it because that is quite a big piece of history in comic book history where DC tried to release a character named Captain Marvel when Marvel had the word Marvel trademark. So it's a big old legal mess with comic books. Anyways, let's move on. Iconic scenes. This was tough because, like I said, this is not a movie that I consider great or even good. But there are still some scenes that pop up to my head that I think are pretty entertaining. And the first ones I think of when I hear the title, Captain Marvel. So the first one, Carol fighting Skrulls on the ship. This is at the beginning of the movie where they're looking into her brain. They're trying to find the location of the device, the Tesseract, and Dr. Lawson and all that. she ends up breaking out. She's got these big old cuffs that are containing her fist so that she can't access her powers. So she's beating the Skrulls, uh, beating the crap out of the Skrulls with those, and then eventually she breaks out of it and uses her powers that she got from the Tesseract. So that's a scene that I always think of. Another one: Carol and Fury fighting Talos, who is in the form of Ben Mendelsohn himself as one of the directors of Shield. In that library area, that's a pretty cool action sequence there. Carol changing the suit colors with Lieutenant Trouble is pretty cool, going through all the different iterations of the Captain Marvel character, through the comics, TV shows, and then eventually you get to the one that you see in the movie. That's a pretty fun scene to watch. Carol fighting the Kree on the Skrull ship as they fight over that lunchbox where the Kree thinks that the Tesseract is being held in, but actually Goose, that cat that's actually a Flurkin, ate it. But that's a pretty cool action sequence as well. And then we have the final scene, Carol versus Jude Law on Earth. This is tough. The one that's most iconic, it's probably... Interesting. This is tough. Now that I think of it, it's probably not even one on the list. It's probably when the jet ends up getting blown up and she gets her powers. Is probably the most iconic to me. So when I think of the most, so I threw a wrench in there for you guys. I didn't even list it, and the most iconic scene isn't here. I just thought of it when I heard the word Captain Marvel. See how funny that works. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the one that wasn't even on the list. It was when Carol Danvers shoots the Tesseract engine of the test spacecraft that her and Dr. Lawson were testing. It explodes, and she gets infected with the Tesseract effects, and she's given the powers of Captain Marvel, which is the scene on today's episode's cover art, as you see me, getting affected by the Tesseract powers. So that is the most iconic scene, I think. Follow up, probably the Carol and Jude Law fight on Earth at the very end of the movie. I think of that one as well. The let's fucking go moments of Captain Marvel. Again, this was a new segment that we started at the Avengers Infinity War episode. These are the scenes of the movie that's like gives you really hyped and you're like, let's fucking go. Let's watch something awesome. There's only two I could think of in this movie. One, when Carol bursts out of those restraints on that Skrull ship when she's getting her mind looked at. And then the other one is when Carol overtakes the Supreme Intelligence at the very end of the movie, where she's all up in those LED lit wires. She's having this last face-to-face with the Supreme Intelligence, and she realizes that she's been fighting with one arm behind her back, and she breaks out of those restraints, and she becomes the full form of Captain Marvel. It's a really cool moment. When you see her do that, it's like, let's fucking go. That's probably the biggest let's fucking go moment for me, is when she overtakes the Supreme Intelligence and gets her full power from there. It's really, really awesome. Favorite quotes. This one was tough. There wasn't a whole lot of quotes that stuck out to me, but there was a few that did, though. This one from Nick Fury. You know anything about a lady blowing up a blockbuster? Witnesses say she was dressed for laser tag. It's a very 1995 line, but it's also very funny. I like it. This one from Carol Danvers. I have nothing to prove to you. That's a really good line that she says to Jude Law's character. This one from Maria Rambo. You call me young lady again, I'll shove my foot somewhere it's not supposed to be. This is when Talos responds, am I supposed to guess where that is? And then Nick Fury and Carol both respond with your ass. It's really funny exchange. This one from Maria Rambo. You are Carol Danvers. You were the woman on that black box risking her life to do the right thing. My best friend. You supported me as a mother and a pilot when no one else did. You were smart and funny and a huge pain in my ass. And you were the most powerful person I knew way before you could shoot fire through your fists. So really like a really big pep talk for Carol right before she goes and faces the Kree from Maria Rambo. Really good moment between the two best friends. This one from Ronan. We'll be back for the weapon. The other accuser next to him goes, the core. And then Ronan responds, the woman, in that Lee Pace voice. And then this last one from Dr. Lawson. Come on, Ace. Do some of that pilot shit. That's a funny line as well. My favorite one. Probably the pep talk from Maria Rambeau. It's a pretty good pep talk. You know, Captain Marvel's really, doubting herself during this movie a lot, discovering who she is, and trying to remember all the relationships that she has built while also, embracing the new ones that she has met. And this pep talk was actually pretty good. It was well performed um, by the actress Lashana Lynch, who plays Maria in here. Uh, I think that's probably the best one, that my favorite one, next to probably "Come on, Ace, do some of that pilot shit." That's a pretty fun line as well. But I also like that Blockbuster line. Like I said, it's very 90s, with Blockbuster and laser tag in the same quote. It's really, really 1995. But I'm gonna go with the pep talk from Maria Rambeau. And then some fun facts here about the movie to wrap things up. Stan Lee passed away while the film was being edited. As a result, Marvel Studios put together the special opening logo to honor him. So if you saw this movie in theaters, you remember that they did the same thing with Chadwick Boseman when he passed away, where they do the Marvel Studios intro, but it was all Stan Lee. It was really nice. Samuel L. Jackson improvised checking out the Skrulls' junk beneath the sheet during that autopsy scene. That's definitely a Samuel L. Jackson thing to do, is to just kind of peek at the junk of a dead alien. The cutout character that Verse shoots in the Blockbuster store was originally supposed to be the Mask, with Verse mistaking the green face for a Skrull. But unfortunately, the filmmakers couldn't secure the rights from Warner Brothers, who owns the film's distribution rights and is also a rival company of Disney. So Harry Tasker from True Lies was chosen instead. Harry was, of course, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in True Lies. Brie Larson is allergic to cats, so her scenes involving Goose were filmed with a puppet or a computer-generated VFX. That is interesting. In the comics, Captain Marvel's cat is named Chewie, after Chewbacca from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. In this film, it was named Goose, after Goose Bradshaw from Top Gun. In the original comics, Carol was an alcoholic. The screenwriters had to omit this characteristic to make her more feasible to the audience. This was also done by Tony Stark. I don't think Kevin Feige was a huge fan of a drunk Robert Downey Jr. on screen, so they had to adjust that characteristic as well. Goose is played by 4 different professional cat actors named Reggie, Gonzo, Archie, and Rizzo. To prepare for her role as Captain Marvel, Brie Larson trained for 4 hours a day over 9 months, learning judo, boxing, and wrestling. She also visited Nellis Air Force Base and met with active duty airmen. That's pretty cool that she was on site. I love it when actors do that, when they actually go to whatever profession or whatever it is that they're playing in a movie. They actually go there, interact, get some authenticity to the role. Really like it. The Skrull makeup took about 2 hours to apply every day, and then Keanu Reeves was almost cast as young Rogue, but it ended up going to Jude Law. I'm hoping they bring back Keanu Reeves for like Ghost Rider or something, not waste him as the antagonist in a Captain Marvel film. I'm glad that they ended up with Jude Law. Nothing against Jude Law, but Keanu Reeves, I think, needs to like be a more memorable role in the MCU because of his acting chops. So I'm hoping he gets cast in like a Ghost Rider role or something like that in the MCU. Something that's more prominent than just a throwaway villain in a Captain Marvel movie. So as you can probably tell from the review today, I'm not a big fan of Captain Marvel, the character itself or the movie. It's definitely on the lower scale of the MCU ranking, which we'll talk about here in a second. I'm just not a huge fan of Brie Larson. I think she was greatly miscast. I just don't believe in her acting ability. She had the look for the most part. It was cool seeing when she put the helmet on. She's got the iconic hair flow, like a lot of the comic book suits have, but just wasn't vibing with Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. I never have, never will. We'll see what the future holds with her come Doomsday and Secret Wars, if they continue with her character, or do they kill her off and Miss Marvel takes over? Does Monica Rambeau take over? There's different directions they can go with. I'm more of a fan of Miss Marvel than I am Captain Marvel, so I hope that they kind of phase out Brie Larson and give the spotlight to Miss Marvel, because I absolutely love it. And I'm super excited to rewatch that show as well for the podcast. A lot of the Disney shows I haven't seen since they aired because there were too many of them and they weren't that well made or executed. There's a really third act issue is the biggest thing with the MCU shows, and we're going to talk about that a lot on those episodes, specifically the WandaVision and the Falcon and Winter Soldier show. The third acts of those shows were very disappointing. But anyways, focusing on Captain Marvel still. Not a huge fan of Brie Larson, so it really affects how I look at this movie, how I review the movie. But this is just not a good movie. It's definitely a lower tier of the MCU's rankings, and it's just the antagonist is throwaway. Jude Law is just a throwaway villain, and we'll talk about him, of course, in the villain scale. But I am going to rate him the lowest tier that we have in that category. Just very disappointing. This could have been a much better movie. There's a good movie in here somewhere. It's just it just didn't get executed as well as it should have. So with that, let's end things like we always do with the rankings on today's featured film. So we're going to do the MCU ranking, the villain scale, and then we'll wrap things up with the popcorn rating. So first, the MCU rating. Captain Marvel comes in at 49th. That is the bottom, 6 projects of the MCU. So or 5. It's like right there. So 49, we have Captain Marvel. 50, we have the Echo series. 51, the Secret Invasion series. 52 is the Marvels, which is just a travesty of a movie. And then Eternals, Dead Last, which is just a movie that I'm not looking forward to watching, but we're going to do it anyways. It was one of the first episodes on Cinematic Reviews, oddly enough. We're going to do a rewatch of it for the Marvel Marathon that we're doing. It's just not good. But Captain Marvel comes in at 49, right below Thor: The Dark World at 48, The Incredible Hulk at 47, She-Hulk at 46, and then Moon Knight at 45. So yeah, a lot of these MCU shows are way down here, and a lot of the newest phases are down here as well. It's just not good. Not good since Endgame. So the villain scale. Reminder, this is where we rate the villain of the movie. We talk about the motivation, the costumes, and the performance by the actor. So let's talk about Jude Law here. Jude Law is a great actor. I love him. My favorite role of his is probably Watson and the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes films with Robert Downey Jr. as Sherlock Holmes. Word on the street is that they're trying to make a third one, and I hope they do because I really like that iteration of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. And here, not good. I think he was greatly miscast, of course. It's unfortunate that his time in the MCU was this. I feel like he could have been put in a much better role, or they could have written this character a lot better. It's just he didn't have a lot to do. He was basically given one direction: be a slimy piece of shit. And that was it. That was like all the direction he was given. So he was probably trying to find something out of crap, it all comes down to the writing, I think, and some of the execution. But a lot of it's the writing. It's just a character. It's a throwaway character. It's a throwaway villain. Of course, Carol sends him off back to Kree, but we're never going to see him again. I mean, it sounds like from the research I did before the podcast, Jude Law didn't have a really great time with this movie, and he has no connection to the character. So the Jan Rog character is never coming back. And it's because of this poor writing and poor execution of this movie. It's a terrible villain. Looking at the motivation, he believes in the Kree, I guess, is his drive to brainwash Carol Danvers and kill the Skrulls. He's probably brainwashed himself, I guess, but they don't really explain that. But just it's a poorly written motivation. And of course, the execution, again, that's the two biggest things. And then the costume. I mean, the Kree suit's pretty cool. The green, the black. But I will say this. I do like Captain Marvel's outfit in here with the red and the blue, with changing up the color scheme. I actually really like the costume in here. The costuming is pretty good. And with Jude Law, with the Kree green, it stands out. It's really cool. But that's really the only good positive I can get out of here with some of the cool action sequences. Jude Law did a pretty good job with the little bit of action sequences that he's in. I did like how each member of his team had like their own gadgets. So he had like the wrist thing that would, you know, mess up the gravity with things. Jaimin Hansu, which is a part of his group, he had the samurai swords. The one member of his group was like a sniper. It was pretty cool how some of them had their own little abilities within the group. It was pretty cool. So his was like that levitating, gravity altering wrist thing that he was doing. Could have been done better, but it was kind of neat. So I'm giving Yang Rog, played by Jude Law, one Thanos head. Bottom tier of the villain scale. Just the throwaway villain. And then the popcorn rating, I'm only giving this 2 popcorns. I thought about going down the 1, but with the action sequences that I do kind of enjoy, I like the costume of Captain Marvel in here. I like Brie Larson's look. Some of the lines back and forth between the character made me laugh a little bit. The scenes with the Flarkin with Goose, the little cat thing that's eating the Tesseract, were kind of a fun, the little interactions between him and Fury. I think the fact that Fury lost his eyeball from a cat is ridiculous. I was not a fan of that decision. Was hoping that it was in a battle with the Kree is where he lost it. No, he got scratched by a fucking cat, which is kind of poor writing. It's lazy writing, and it's kind of ridiculous. I know they wanted it kind of family friendly and stuff like that, but have the guy lose his eyesight in a battle, not from a freaking alien cat. It's just really unfortunate. So I'm giving Captain Marvel 2 popcorns. So that's going to do it for today's Marvel episode. Next, we're going to return to the Avengers with Avengers Endgame. And then we'll wrap up Phase 3 with Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm super excited to jump back into the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Reminder, like I said at the top of the episode, Cinematic Reviews app will launch on April 12th. Lots of cool features and things like that. You can do the popcorn rating to all your favorite movies. You can see how everybody else rated each movie and see who their favorite actors are, who their favorite movies, favorite shows. A lot of great features. Test your knowledge in the trivia games on the app. It's going to be a blast. I'm super excited for the app launch on April 12th. So with that, have a good weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Cinematic Reviews.